Welcome, everyone, to AURI Connect's Fields of Innovation, part of AURI Connect's event series featuring updates on the work that AURI is doing to accelerate the expansion of the agricultural economy by empowering expanded uses and markets of agriculturally derived products. I'm Dan Scogan, your host for Fields of Innovation. The AURI Connects program is hosted by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. Fields of Innovation, with sponsorship from Bremer Bank and Avisen Legal, is focused on bringing together Minnesota's regional ag and food value chains to build capacity and successfully commercialize new crops and accelerate the commercialization of new crop and livestock opportunities, including new traits for existing crops, events focused on connecting innovation and market development with value chain partners to build a strong ecosystem in Minnesota and its border states that will provide ag producers and value chain partners with new market opportunities. Now remember that this event is being recorded and archived and can be found at auri.org. Also remember that participants are muted, but you can ask questions through the Q&A portal on your screen. Today, we will be exploring the second topic in a three-part series focused on novel and specialty crops. Our panel of processors and early supply chain actors will share what they require to successfully prepare novel and specialty crops to enter the supply chain, equipment options for post-harvest handling and storage, and when expanding and diversifying farm operations, the certification pathway for new seed crops, two newly completed training videos for Kernza perennial grain and winter annual oil seeds. Winter camelina and pennycress will also be shared today. So I'm pleased to introduce to you our panelists today. I'd like to welcome Al Daring, a senior scientist for co-products at the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute, Dr. Nicole Taugis, the agroecologist at the Michael Fields Agriculture Institute, and Dr. Fawad Shah, president and CEO of the Minnesota Crop Improvement Association. Later, joining us on the video and then in our question and answer period will be Jay Peterson, farmer and perennial promise grower cooperative member, and Paul Novotny, farmer and perennial promise grower cooperative member as well. So let's get started. Al Daring, welcome to Fields of Innovation.
Thank you, Dan. As we get started here, one of the things AURI did is we put together a couple of videos focusing on post-harvest handling of these new emerging crops, such as the winter oilseed crops and Kernza, which you had mentioned. One of the phone calls we often receive is, as we look at these new cover crops and these third crop options, is how do you clean the seed? Because some of them are a challenge. So we put these two videos together to highlight different methods that we've worked with companies to develop. And one of the key things that I want to point out is there are different ways to do it, but I'm happy to present the two videos we put together. And then, as you had mentioned, Paul Novotny, who you will see in the video, and Jay Peterson, both producers, they will be joining us at the end of the video or end of the meeting to address questions. I'm Al Daring. Welcome. I'm a senior scientist at AURI, and welcome to the AURI Bioindustrial Innovation Center. Today we're here to talk about winter oil seeds. When I talk about winter oil seeds, what I generally be talking about is winter camelina and yellow pennycress. The reason we want to cover these two crops together is oftentimes the processing is very similar for the two, but if you hear me say winter oil seed, basically, I'm referring to either one of those two products. Today, we're going to be focusing on post-harvest handling of winter oil seeds. The reason this is important is because oftentimes when it comes off of the combine, it contains the chaff and foreign material along with the grain. By removing the chaff and the foreign material, it aids with the storage life because it's going to be reducing moisture that chaff is carrying with it. So today we're going to be taking a look at the processes involved in the steps that we take to get this accomplished. Today we're talking about winter oil seeds and we're here in the lab. The reason we're focusing on winter oil seeds is because they are a crop that can be seeded in the fall, grown over the winter, harvested in the spring, followed by a relay crop or the next crop that you want to plant in the spring. The two that we're primarily focusing on today is yellow pennycress. And yellow pennycress comes in a variety of colors. The original color was actually black, and with breeding and improved genetics, you're seeing more yellow pennycress in the marketplace. The other oil seed we're going to be focusing on today is winter camelina, and you can see that has a different color. One of the key things to keep in mind with winter camelina is that in northern regions, spring camelina is a product that's often grown. In the upper Midwest and in the U.S. here, we are focusing primarily on just winter camelina. One of the key things that we need to do first when seed comes into the lab is get the moisture content. The reason moisture is so important is because you need to lower that moisture content down so it will be preserved or saved if you put it in a grain bin. So what we do is we take a moisture meter, and they come in any different shape and size. You know, we'll load it, we'll get the moisture content. And just like most producers realize, this moisture, we want it to be under 15%. And for these two materials, we often see it ideally under 12% and closer to 10%. That will ensure long-term storage quality. Then following identifying what moisture content it is, if drying is required, we will follow with that process, but oftentimes it's already under 12% moisture. So then comes the separation of the seed from the hull. We do this actually quite easily with these two crops simply by using a 2 millimeter or a 5/32 inch screen. When we get the material in, the seed coat or the hull that the seed is in is about a 1/2 inch in diameter, relatively large. But once you run the materials over a vibrating or a shaker table or a vibrating sieve, the seed easily drops out and separates itself from the hull. The last and final step after sieving the seed is actually doing the final clean to it. Oftentimes, after sieving, that seed still contains some small amounts of foreign material. The way we accomplish this is using an air aspirator. Now, how an aspirator works is, as the feed comes into the aspirator, there's different steps that it'll flow over. That cascades the seed, and at the same time, you have a counterflow of air pulling against it. So the chaff that is lighter and less dense is being pulled up and removed from the seed, and the end result is clean seed coming out the bottom. This can be accomplished through different scales or different sizes of aspirators. As you'll see behind me, there's a much larger aspirator. It operates a little bit different. On this one, you actually have a venturi where you can adjust how that airflow is pulling up through and actually watching the separation occur. What I will do now is actually pour the material through so you can see how it does the separation. And the final result is a very clean seed product ready for storage or further processing. So one of our focuses at AURI is to use the technology we identify and implement it in real-world technologies. With these new oil seeds, there's not a lot of equipment that exists to do the cleaning of these specialty crops. So what we did is we'll work with existing companies that have technology to get the job done. In this case, we worked with a seed cleaner normally used to separate chaff from corn, but in this case, with camelina or winter pennycress, the material will come off of the combine through the cleaner, but rather than the grain passing through, the grain falls to the bottom, the chaff carries out the end, and the producer can take the clean grain from the bottom and haul that back to the farm site. So today I'm joined with Paul Novotny. Paul farms in Fillmore County in southeast Minnesota and has tremendous experience dealing with some of these new emerging oilseed crops. So welcome, Paul. One of the questions we wanted to hear from you today is, what are some of the challenges in the production of these materials?
So my first experience with planting camelina is I dove into the relay, the full relay.
Yep.
So it was camelina in the spring, then planting soybeans. Found out right away that I needed to really focus on combine settings. Unfortunately, in the first field that I did was only just a 3-acre spot because most of the things were trial, so I planted 10 acres that first year. Pretty successful harvesting the camelina. Turned out to be a lot dirtier than what I expected, so I had a lot of extra material. So I had a lot of the seed hulls along with the camelina, which turned out to be complicated, trying to get it out of the combine to get into the next, all the next steps. Also realized that in the first year when I harvested that camelina that I didn't have the combine set quite tight enough, blew some camelina out the back of the combine. So lesson learned, if you're going to follow it with another crop that you aren't going to spray anything to kill anything, you could grow camelina and your next crop together. I was probably, my first time, I was probably 50-50, 50% camelina, 50% everything else.
Yep.
Which was very complicated because I didn't have one of these at the time or any way to clean it, right? So that was, but fortunately I was in a study group, so I sent what I had off, didn't have to deal with it, okay? Year number 2, different story. Year number 2, when I did it, the camelina was mine at that point in time.
Yep.
So a little better job with the combine, didn't lose any, right? But I still ended up with a pretty messy grain tank.
And I think that's quite common, and grain loss, I think a thing for people viewing this to keep in mind is that we're talking about a very small seed here, very similar to what you say almost an alfalfa seed. So when you talk grain loss behind a combine, that's very common. It's very easy to do. So combine settings are hard. So looking forward, as you clean your material, what goals do you have in mind to handle the cleaning coming out of the field this year?
Well, the more people that try it, the more information that comes out. Now I know that maybe I picked a clover setting in my combine.
Yep.
And now I think I'm going to try the rapeseed
Yep.
setting. What I don't know yet is how much you lose in what setting, because obviously we're not harvesting rape, we're harvesting winter camelina.
Right.
So it just all depends. I'm of the mindset that I would rather harvest all the camelina, so I'm on the more side where I'm going to try to collect all the camelina and clean it afterward than to try to have a clean sample and leave some behind. I'm going to try to tighten down the combine, try to get rid of a little less stuff, or a little more stuff, but yet try to accomplish no grain loss.
And I think that's a good goal because oftentimes, number one focus, collect the grain that's out there first. And what we have seen is it is relatively easy to separate the grain from the seed pod and the foreign material. The only issue is you have a lot of mass to deal with at first. But once we can figure out how to easily separate those two, going after the grain first is a great priority.
Well, that's the way I'm looking at it. That's the way I'm approaching it, because you're selling it by the pound.
Yep.
Right? So, I know it's not a lot of money, but it appeared that my first time planting, I left probably 10 pounds on the landscape. Right? Which is, when you're harvesting maybe 12 to 1,500
Right.
pounds, leaving 10 pounds behind is not that big of a deal, other than the part of it's there. So you'll grow it again, all by itself. So
Excellent.
I'm going with zero. I'm trying to accomplish zero loss so that I don't leave any behind. Not only for getting it all, but I don't want to grow it again.
So Paul, what is some advice you would give to growers considering growing these new winter oil seeds? What are some hurdles? What have you seen? We'd be interested in hearing your thoughts.
Probably the message that I would say is it's not, if you're a farmer and you're used to harvesting corn, soybeans, you usually generally have the cleanest sample you can possibly get. As it progresses, I think we can get there with combine settings and different combines and maybe different aspects of setting up the combine. But I think right now what I chose to do is I chose to harvest it all. It's a really messy sample in the tank. It's really easy to clean the material after the fact. So go with the mindset of you're not doing anything wrong if it's really messy in the combine and you have a lot of material. There's a way to clean it.
Well, perfect. Well, Paul, we appreciate you coming in today to share some of your history, your knowledge with harvesting these winter oilseed crops, and look forward to working with you in the future.
Yeah, thank you.
As I mentioned, Paul will be around for questions after the second video plays. This next video, that one focuses on Kernza grain. Kernza is a little bit trickier than the winter oilseed crops, and Jay Peterson will be highlighted, the producer in this one, and he'll also be around for questions later. Welcome, I'm Al Deering, Senior Scientist at AURI. Today we are at the AURI Bioindustrial Innovation Center. Today we're going to be focusing and taking a look at Kernza perennial grain. The reason we want to focus on this grain is because AURI provides assistance to clients focusing on the development and cleaning of this grain so then producers can take those processes and implement it at their location. So come with me and we'll take a look at the various processes that we follow in the pilot lab to get this accomplished. One of the things we need to focus on when Kernza comes into us is cleaning the material. So as you can see by this sample, there's a lot of organic material, whether it's the stems, various trash that comes in off the combine, which is typical when combining Kernza. What we want to do is get it to this stage where it is obviously clean, and that involves a variety of steps. The interesting thing to note though, with Kernza there is some free thresh grain already that comes in this material, and that is something breeders and genetics are trying to improve in the product, so more of it is free threshing, so it is not as involved trying to separate the actual seed from the grain and get it out of the seed coat. So like many seeds, one of the first important things to do is identify the moisture. And the reason moisture is so important is because you do not want any bacterial or microbial growth within the material. Because when you do get the additional stems and trash in with the seed, that holds a lot of additional moisture that you don't want. So as we always do, we always take a sample of the moisture right away to see, are we at 15% moisture, which we can work with? Are we at 12% moisture, which is actually stable and can store for an extended period? Or are we up around the 18% or 20% moisture, where we may have to consider some additional drying? After we have taken the moisture sample, then comes the first cut. Obviously, we need to do the separation. So what we do at AURI is we have a variety of screens that we conduct some hand testing on initially, and they range in size from 3/64 all the way up to 5/32. But what's unique about this seed, and think of a wild rice seed, it is elongated and narrow. When you look at Kernza, it is very similar to that. So you don't have a screen that is rectangular. Instead, they're all elongated. And then what we want to try to do is match the width of that grain so it will fall through the screen rather than being retained, because we want to separate that seed from the trash material. One of the things we have identified here is to make that first cut, or the first separation, to take these long stems away from the grain, is to use a 5/64 or a 4/64 inch elongated screen to do that initial cut. That'll allow the organic matter to set on the top and be discharged while the seed passes through. Then as we go through the second screen, we use a 3/64 inch elongated screen, 1/2 inch long, that takes that final seed and lets that pass through. And then you end up with a pretty clean cut of material waiting for additional aspiration or final cleaning. So here we are at the vibrating sieve, which I had discussed to do the separation of the dirty grain and try to liberate the clean grain from it, or the grain that's in the hull yet. So as you can see, the top sieve, the purpose for this sieve is to take the long chaff or the long stems, the straw, away from the seed. And it's very coarse, long, and as you can guess, there's very, very little seed remaining in that cut, and that can be discarded. Here on this side, you'll see our final cut. What this is oftentimes a lot of the liberated seed or the kernza seed that is outside of its hull already. Very clean, and all that's left here is to run it through an impact dehuller and then do a final cleaning on that. And now we have the mid-range cut. This is actually the kernza seed that is still in the hull. So all of this material will go to the impact dehuller to break that seed coat away from the seed to free that up for cleaning. So the next step after sieving the material and removing the large foreign material from the seed, it is actually to take the seed, some which is free threshed and some which is still in the hull, and run it through an impact dehuller. What the impact dehuller does is as the seed falls into the chamber, it is thrown to the outside ring, and the impact of the seed coat hitting that outside ring separates or liberates the actual seed from the seed coat around it, and it will come out the side. So I'll show you an example of that. Now, if you look closely at this seed, you're going to start to notice that there's a lot more visible seed in the material. You'll still see the seed coat that it was freed from, but that will be followed by either additional sieving or a last step of aspiration, which will remove that seed coat because it's light and low density from the seed. The final step to cleaning the kernza is to remove that light chaff away from the clean seed. The way we accomplish this is utilizing an air aspirator. What the aspirator does is as we pour the material into the aspirator, it'll fan it and cascade the seed down. In the meantime, there's an airflow concurrent to it that's lifting and pulling the low density chaff away from the seed. Hopefully the end result is clean seed out the bottom. We use the air aspirator in our facility, but there's other equipment that can be used, such as air classifiers and many more different sieves. So after final aspiration and air classification to remove the foreign material, the end result should be a clean kernza product. This is now ready to be used as a value-added ingredient. But today I'm joined by Jay Peterson, a producer from Mower County, Minnesota. And what Jay has put together here is very similar to what we showed in the pilot lab. And it's a great example of how you can do this on farm. So Jay, thank you for joining us. And if you want to walk us through your step here and the process, we'd appreciate it.
Well, thank you for coming out. And like I said, Jay Peterson from Blooming Prairie, Minnesota. I'm a member of the Perennial Promise Growers Co-op, and we've been developing this crop for years. And we found that in order to make it marketable, we actually needed to condition this crop before it went to the final cleaning stage. I have mine in the wagon. In the wagon, it's covered, so it's protected. That's a major important thing to keep. It's a food grade product, so we don't want to have birds and mice and anything else, water in there. And you can see from here, it doesn't flow out of the wagon very well. And when it's in this condition, it doesn't flow through the processor's equipment either. So that is a major problem. From here, we'll take this product, it'll come out real slow. It'll go through this air transfer fan, a wood dust collecting fan, but what it does is it actually impacts this grain that is still in the hull. It will break it free. It'll also shrink the size of some of the straw that slows up the flow. From there, it goes into my hopper bin and then flows into our cleaner inside. This is a hopper bin that I have on my farm that I use just to hold the kernza after it's been through the transfer fan. It doesn't need to be this device. It could be another bin, another wagon, or totes. So now we're inside the Perennial Promise Growers Co-op mobile cleaning trailer that we put together with AURI's air screener. And what we're doing here now is we're using a flexible auger to bring the product in the hopper. And as this shakes, the screens will separate the good kernza from the lighter hulls and the straw. The most important thing this is doing is taking the straw out so that When it goes through the screen, it goes into a tote, and it will have some hulls in it, but that is actually good for longer term storage. And the final processing then will be done at the cleaners to get it down to what goes in the bag. So here we are at the end of our cleaning system. We've got a flexible auger taking our kernza into a tote for storage, and our kernza is ready for storage and delivery to the final processor.
Interesting videos, and with that, I think we'll turn to Nicole Taugis, the agroecologist at Michael Fields Agricultural Institute, to share some of her information. Dr. Nicole, welcome to Fields of Innovation.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Alexandra and AURI, for inviting me. I think I was invited to provide, let's just say, a small scale or a beginning farmer perspective to cleaning kernza. I've worked with beginning farmers in another program we offer through the Michael Fields Institute, and post-harvest handling for any crop is hard for beginning farmers, even ones without hulls and ones that are a lot easier to clean. But kernza has proven to be difficult to handle post-harvest, but it's not too bad once you discover a few things. And part of what makes it hard is that it's new, uncharted territory. But as you can tell from seeing Jay's setup, people are really working through this and we're all figuring it out together. So I'll just jump right in here. I'm an agroecologist at the Michael Fields Ag Institute. We're located in southeastern Wisconsin between Madison and Milwaukee. I am part of kernza research being led by the University of Minnesota, Dr. Jacob Youngers. And I got into kernza through postdocing at UMN back in 2017. So I've been in the research world with kernza for a while. Back in 2020, when we started the research project, we do own some farmland as well. We had a relatively steep slope that was pretty erodible. My colleague at the Institute had noticed that there was a lot of soil export during heavy rains. So we were having some washout issues. We're worried about nutrient pollution leaving the field and going into the Mukwonago River watershed, which is the second cleanest watershed in Wisconsin, and everyone would like to keep it that way. So we felt that we had this slope that needed some remediation, some environmental conservation, and we felt that we're working with kernza. Let's put some kernza on this. It's a 18-acre field area. And let's get some protection from kernza. And then come harvest time, we said, well, we have to harvest it. And then, well, what do we do with it from there? So that led us to this process. You can see this is a picture of the field. You can't really tell in this picture that it's a slope, but there's a prevailing slope kind of going this way. The first year we did swath it. So you can see we have the kernza lying in windrows at harvest time, and then I picked it up with a plot combine. There were a lot of problems that we had with this process. One of which was that we had some problems from our old plot combine. Kernza sat in the swath too long, but even still, it was in the swath for 10 days, which I've heard has worked fine for some people farther out west, but it didn't work that well for us. We ended up exceeding the DON levels with this. So there were too high levels of vomitoxin. It wasn't marketable. So I said, I don't think I'm going to swath again. So I'll come back to that. But this is another really cool picture of the field that I like to share because it really illustrates what perennial crops can bring us beyond other, let's say, more conventional conservation methods. So on the left, you see this is the kernza that we planted in that field. On the right is where we are leaving the rest of the field be to rent out to another organic land manager who does use best management practices. So he planted winter cereal rye after corn. This is a nice shot. This was taken right at the beginning of May. So you can see how green and lush and how much biomass is present. Let's just say May 1 compared to what our winter rye cover crop using best management practices is giving us, right? So there's a lot more photosynthetic capture of carbon, of energy, a lot more biomass accrual, a lot more root production happening. So this is an illustration of why perennial crops can really be awesome. Like I said, in year 2, we went on and we did direct cut, and this yielded a bin run product that looked like this, which we were pretty happy with. It looks pretty similar to what Jay Peterson was demonstrating. We worked with our very helpful neighbors to custom harvest, because they have a good combine that we felt would do the job, and they were interested in being a part of the Kernza production to observe how that could fit into conservation agriculture around here in southeastern Wisconsin. So thanks to Long Winter Farm and the AdSets for helping us with this project. And they did a great job combining the first year. At the same time, we felt that there were still large pieces of stem, and we did a better job this last year. So this was a picture that was taken from the 2022 harvest, and we were even more pleased with what we got in this last year, the 2023 harvest. Luckily, well, yeah, so then we had to work together, Long Winter Farm, and they have a toll cleaning operation and a mill called Rooster Milling. They were willing to help us clean the grain, so we're setting up kind of a little local hub of Kernza production and processing down here in southeastern Wisconsin. Given how far away we are from what the Perennial Promise Growers Co-op has set up, that's all wonderful. But we wanted to, I didn't love the thought of shipping it that far, particularly for some of that grain to come back to go to Wisconsin end users. I felt that a lot of the carbon that I was ostensibly sequestering through growing Kernza was then being blown off again in that shipping process. So given that we had some local capacity to give it a shot here, we undertook that. So actually, I went and drove to, speaking of blowing off carbon, I did drive all the way to Waseca, Minnesota for a 2-hour training session with cleaning Kernza, which was provided very kindly by Riley, can't remember his last name, with AURI. He was very generous with me in sharing some information. This was a picture that I drew while I was there, and this has just been an invaluable heuristic as I was trying to convey some of the information to our toll cleaner. And this is what was described in the video as well by Alan. So we pull up to their facility, and I've got some pictures of the process. Right now, most of the cleaning equipment is set up outside on a trailer. We're working together to get some investment to be able to move a lot of this cleaning infrastructure inside. But we've got some pictures of what's going on here. And forgive me, I think there might be some noise associated with these videos, but what I show in this one, so I'll say what they show, and then I'll let the video play just a little bit. I won't try to talk over it. A problem with Kernza is that it's really hard to get to flow. It takes extra labor to get it to flow out of anything that relies on gravity for grain flow. So that would be a gravity wagon. I was storing our Kernza in gravity wagons, obviously undercover to, keep moisture out of it. I was using, I don't have a picture of that, but we were augering right out of the combine into the gravity wagon. I didn't go through any, say, rotary cleaner step because I felt that it was dry enough at harvest time. I did install 2 or 3 tube fans, the screw fans that kind of screw down into your grain when it's sitting in a trailer or a tote or sack. I put two or three of those in each gravity wagon and left them on for 2 weeks. And it did keep the grain in good condition. So you'll notice in this video, it doesn't just flow out of the gravity wagon, and it takes a lot of manual labor to kind of facilitate that. So let me just play this a little bit. So that's something that we encountered, the toll cleaning facility guy, the head of it, the first time he cleaned the Kernza, he did it by himself. And he said it was a real pain to have to climb up in the gravity wagon, push it down, facilitate that flow when he doesn't usually have to do that. So it ended up requiring extra labor to make the process flow a little bit more. So that's something to keep in mind when you're dealing with a really fluffy hulled product like Kernza. I've got some more pictures here of running over the clipper table. That's the one on the left here. And that we largely followed, what you saw in that drawing in terms of screen sizes with the 3/64 and the 5/64. Though those are in opposite order of chronology of the grain passing over it, what I just mentioned. So the 3/64 cut out the clean grain from the grain that still had holes on it. We did a pass where this went over the clipper, and then it went through the dehuller, and then it recirculated over the clipper table again, and then it recirculated through the dehuller, and then it recirculated back over the clipper table for a third time. So we ended up doing 2 passes through the dehuller and ultimately 3 over the clipper table. And then something that we found was a really important step and really useful in cleaning was this gravity table. So this was the final step before the grain was put into the final stack for takeaway for export. And I'll play the video here and then I'll say a little more. Oops. So those of you who may or may not be familiar with how a gravity table works, this table has little holes in it, so there's air puffing up, and it's also shaking and it's set at an incline. So you can adjust the air blowing up through, and you can also adjust the incline. So you'll see this is adjusted so that any remaining hulls flow down towards the bottom, and then it flows off the end here. It's shaken off the end, and then the hulled part go into a trash bin. Or actually, in this case, they're actually recirculated again for additional cleaning. And then the clean grain without hull goes off of a different chute, and then that gets augured in to the sack as the final product. We had to turn the air down for Kernza as relative to what the cleaners expected, because it's a very small, light seed. So keep that in mind. If you're working with gravity table, you should, try different settings first. And then, we did still have some small clover seeds. This was a field that we did have legume intercrops in, both intentionally and unintentionally. Despite all of that cleaning process that I mentioned, including an aspirator step, we still had a visually noticeable level of clover seeds that were coming out after this final step. So that poses a little bit of a challenge in terms of the screen sizes that we were talking about, in terms of getting a product that's completely 100% clean. I would say we were able to clean out almost everything else except for that clover seed. And some of it came out, it was blown off by the air, but just some of it didn't. I had been thinking about that as a real negative to having intercrops in the field. But then another grower friend of mine reminded me that, clover seeds are really expensive. If you can clean out 100, 200 pounds, you'll save yourself several $100s because you can reuse that in other parts of your operation. And that's generally more on the more costly side of seed. So I thought that's a really good point. It does represent additional steps with, very small screens to separate the Kernza from the very small clover. But I do think that that's doable. There's also color sorting that could happen. It would add an additional step in cost, so you'd have to do an economic analysis of that, but that is an option, because intercrop legume seed can be valuable. There is also, with this gravity table, it got us some really nice clean product, but we had to make a decision about how much we're scalping off, because if we remove more hull, then we'd also remove more good seed, which is a trade-off in any seed cleaning operation. But you're going to have to look at each lot that you're cleaning and make a decision about how you want to adjust that. And it probably depends on the buyer and how clean they're going to demand their seed, or how much tolerance they'll have for a little bit of hull. For a milling operation, I think, it's my milling operation, so I can make decisions about how much hull inclusion I'm okay with. But if you are milling, generally a lot of that hull can be sifted out, and so you can, I think, I'm not a milling expert, But in my view, you can tolerate more of the hull if that's the application than if somebody is like a very picky distiller who wants the grain looking perfect going into the mash, or whole grain customers, you know, something like that. So just like all things in cleaning, it depends. Yeah, this is the picture of our final product, our final clean product that we decided we were happy with. And yeah, the milling operation. So I started off doing this. I have a very small mill. This mill's about a pound in 2 minutes. It is a stone mill. It's a tabletop stone mill. So I was basically milling to order and having that go in this bag. And then I was even sifting by hand. I got a 30 mesh sieve to sift out the bran. Why 30 mesh? That's what I found is the standard for whole grain flour when I did a little bit of research. I think that you could improve the quality of performance of the flour if you sifted out more of the bran. Then you're getting an even lower, you know, volume returned ratio relative to your bin run seed, which is already really low, considering you often have clean out rates of over 50%. So again, trade-offs with revenue returns, and it depends on your yield, and it depends on how picky you want to be about your flour performance. But generally, I think the more bran we can sift out, the better the flour is going to perform. So that's the picture of our bag product that we had. Luckily this year I've moved away from having to mill by hand. Thank goodness that took so much time. And we did, since the Rooster Milling has a mill in place now, I did have it build with them, so I don't need to do that anymore. But that's how a really small operation got started. I think that's my last slide. Yep. Yeah, so I think lessons learned is that a gravity table is invaluable. It's a really great add-on to all the other things that were shared in the video, and that there's a lot that can be experimented with on the milling side, and in understanding how decisions we make at the milling step are going to affect performance. And the last thing I'll mention is that we don't have that many customers. We have a few nice customers who are enjoying using our kernels of flour for crackers. And so far, but that's been the most popular product. And we also get good feedback on pizza crust as well. But, all right, thank you. I'll hand it off.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole Tauges, and for that presentation. I want to remind those who are participating today online that you can enter your questions in the Q&A portal. We have one more presenter today, and then we will be going to our questions and answers with all of the presenters. So feel free to have general questions in there, or if you have something specific to what you have heard today, certainly you can ask a direct question as well. We move to our final presenter before we move to Q&A, and that is Dr. Fawad Shah. Dr. Shah, please introduce yourself and welcome to the Fields of Innovation.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, AURI, for inviting me and having MCIA as part of this this program. Just a little bit of my background. I've been the president and CEO since 2015. I have a long experience in seed regulatory and testing division at USDA, and also seed certification background. So with that, I'll just start with my slides. So MCIA, just a quick brief history. We are the seed certification agency, started as a field crop breeders association in 1903, and the purpose was that the seed, the new varieties that are produced by University of Minnesota breeders, they were to remain pure, and they were getting contaminated. So the purpose of MCIA was to distribute the the University of Minnesota released varieties, and so they can maintain their identity and quality over generations. In 1955, we've been given the status of the official seed certification agency in the state of Minnesota. We are the only agency who can do seed certification. This setup is very true for other states as well. There is one agency per state for the most part. MCIA primarily was involved in seed certification and foundation seed development program, which I'll talk in a little bit. Essentially, that was before 1995. And after that, we created a lot of new programs that kind of fed into the realm of seed certification or a very, very similar model. So I won't go through the list of those programs, but those are there. And we are constantly looking for solutions. Primarily we are involved in inspection and audit-based programs. So that is the expertise that we have. We can develop the programs, and we can work with our agricultural partners that they can get the verification or compliance from us and market those products in domestic and especially in foreign markets. We have about 500 plus members. This is on the seed certification side, and we have about the same number of members or even more on the organic inspection and certification services, which we also perform. Our MCIA is governed by 11-member board of directors elected from our membership. Most of them are our farmers. MCIA is an IASCA member, which is the Association of Official Seed Certifying Agencies. That is the umbrella organization for primarily North America, but there are some other countries, including Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Brazil, Argentina, Canada. Those are additional members. We do inspect roughly about 225 to 250,000 acres every year. So there are two types of certification work. Essentially, it is the same, but however, it depends on where the seed is destined to. So for the domestic markets, it is the USA certified, the top tag that you see with the IASCA logo. And then the bottom blue tag, both of them are blue in color. You would notice that. And this is a symbol for certified seed. The bottom tag is for OECD, that stands for Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and the seed is certified according to the OECD seed scheme standards, and primarily the seed moves into international, especially in the European markets. So we do participate in both spaces. So essentially, in the space of seed certification, it has basically three main components. One is the field inspection. When we receive the application, it has its own information that we gather. You know, we verify the planting stock. We send the application over to our inspectors. You see one of the inspectors holding wheat in a wheat field, holding some wheat plants. And they have their own territories that they operate in. They look for off types, if there are any off types, other crops being grown. For instance, if this wheat field was previously grown for soybean or corn crop, is there any contamination there? For that, we also look for isolation distances. We look for any presence of noxious weeds or any unusual trends in the field. After the field inspection is done and the field supposedly passes the inspection, the harvest of that field goes to a seed conditioning plant, something very similar to what we have seen in the earlier from the earlier presenters, that the seed is subjected to a bunch of sieves and gravity table. That was one of those equipments that are used in the seed conditioning operation. Those seed conditioning facilities are approved by MCIA. So the seed that is destined to be certified has to be cleaned in the seed approved seed conditioning facilities that are approved by MCIA. Once that is done and a representative sample is taken and the sample travels to our lab, which we apply the lab standards. So the field standards are applied when the crop is still in the field, and it is conditioned according to the conditioning principles and at approved lab, and then the lab receives the sample from that conditioning plant, and we subject the seed to you have seen moisture test. That's one of the important tests that we normally perform. However, for seed certification, purity and germination are the two most important tests that we perform in our lab. Now, purity would include inert matter or foreign material that you have seen in Kernza example before. Also, presence of other weeds, other crops in that crop that is being asked for certification. Those types of things, and then the germination capacity, germination capability of that lot. So combination of that, if those standards are met, then we issue a blue tag that you see in your screen. It is called blue certification tag or blue tag. It's also very commonly known as certified seed tag. And that tag has to be attached to the bag to be sure that the seed that contained in that bag is certified. With respect to the foundation seed program, we work directly with the university plant breeders. We pick up the finite quantities of the seed that is, or the varieties that are released. We are part of the variety release and committee as well. And we do increase that seed here on campus, also at Rosemont and other places outstate to facilitate increase in that newly released varieties, so the farmers can put their hands on that seed and work with and take advantage of the new genetics and new varieties that are developed with the criteria of DUS, which is called distinctness, uniformity, and stability. So that is essential for a variety to be released. We do distribute the foundation seed, obviously, to our growers, and also we work with out-of-state customers that work directly with us. They are interested in University of Minnesota foundation, University of Minnesota varieties, and we have the foundation seed available. We do provide that seed. The one that is grown on campus here on a very small scale, half an acre, an acre, or 2 acres. And we do have a seed conditioning plant here in our facility. If any of you would have some interest, we'll be happy to show you how that works. We recently purchased, in cooperation with the university, a seed color sorter, which kind of separates the seeds based on the size and shape and color. And it's very handy, especially for new varieties that are being developed, and they want to have just a final stage of cleaning that seed so they can kind of put that back into the ground for increased purposes or for breeding purposes. For larger production, we do contract out with growers that have been long-standing growers with us. They produce foundation seed for us under the foundation seed criteria and standards, and we've been working with them for a long time. There are 2 avenues that when the variety is released at the University of Minnesota, either it goes public or it goes to private. For public releases, the examples that I've been mentioning before, we do get involved on the variety especially for small grains. It gets PVP protected, plant variety protection under the USDA program, and the variety has to be produced and sold as a class of certified seed. So that's way we have a way to generate variety development fund for the certified seed that is being sold. We collect a small percentage, and we give 90% of that back to the university. The other route that we are involved with is the variety licensing services. So some growers or some companies, they may like the genetics and they don't want anybody else to have that genetics. They can get in touch with us, and we normally are in contact with them anyways, and we bring them under the variety licensing agreement. And that under that agreement, the main thing is that there is no breeding privileges that they can utilize. They can only produce and market under certain marketing space, either domestic or international. So we are involved with trust species, soybeans, wheat, barley, and other things, and we do have exclusive and non-exclusive licenses. Couple of other programs. So one is the quality assurance program, and that we offer. Essentially, it is a step below certification program, very similar to that. However, We take the seed source as a non-certified seed, but we do provide some verification, whether it's a post-harvest, post-spray harvest sprays, or pre-harvest, post-maturation sprays, or soybean flower color inspection. That's very, very popular for private companies that they engage us, and we provide that service to them. Another service that we offer is the identity preserved program, and basically we develop a third-party audit-based program considering what the needs are in this in the industry. Most recently, we worked directly with SSGA, especially Soy and Grain Alliance, and develop U.S. Identity Preserve program, and they are basically going gung-ho with that and going international. There are 4 or 5 facilities in Minnesota that we have inspected and audited under that program, and those facilities from that point forward were able to export under the U.S. Identity Preserve program portfolio. Other programs that we offer is the native seed certification program. I won't spend too much time there. And noxious weed forage, weed-free forage and mulch certification program that we are involved with under the North American weed-free forage program. That is one of the smaller programs that we are involved with. We do offer, after that is done, we offer specialty tags, and the tags are attached on those bales. A lot of times those bales are utilized by the Horses Association that they wanted to have a weed-free bales or weed-free forage for their horses or for their cattle. Also, there are some this utilization is along the some of the production or train sites where there are some oil companies are kind of digging up, and then they wanted to cover the land. They utilize those weed-free forage and mulch under that program. I mentioned we have organic certification program. We are certified under USDA National Organic program, and we operate under all those 4 disciplines: producers, handlers, wild crop, and livestock. And we do provide inspection and audit services under that program. In the seed lab, the purpose of the lab is to determine, or the seed testing, the purpose of seed testing is to determine the value of seed. And that's what we do in our lab. We do have registered seed technologists on staff, and whether it is seed that is destined for certification or seed that is not destined for seed certification, for common seed or certified seed, we can test any of those. And our lab stays very busy post-harvest time. Right now is a busy time for the lab. And we go through April, May, and then the cycle continues again. I did mention about the quality. Another program that we have is the sod quality assurance, and we basically perform that. It's very similar to certification program, and we work collaborate with the Minnesota Turf Association and also the University of Minnesota MnDOT, and that we have launched in their cooperation, and we do inspect and certify sod quality. Facilities audit that I have mentioned, this is one of the examples of those facilities that we would audit, and that's where the certified seed, the seed that was harvested, inspected, and it goes into the this facility, this type of facility where the seed gets cleaned, all the noxious weeds, inert matter, and those types of things are conditioned out. We do offer other programs as well. I won't spend too much time there. I'm running short of time. But I mentioned about the SSCA. This is the logo for the U.S. Identity Preserve program. It's been very, very popular most recently. And we developed a non-GMO grain traceability program in cooperation with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, where we basically issue a certificate of compliance after going through from the seed source to the planting to the growing, harvesting, transportation, conditioning, packaging, all of that. All of those steps that we inspect and audit. And this is in an effort to facilitate domestic and international trade. It's a certificate of compliance that we will issue, and the department will issue its own certificate of compliance based on our audit and inspection services. Okay. I won't go through that. This is identity preserve program logo or the tag that we would place on those products after that they have gone through all the standards. So I'll stop here. I'll just mention a couple of things real quick. In addition to what I have mentioned, is MCIA is not only state's only seed certification agency, but we are very progressive in terms of looking into opportunities and working with our partners, mainly in the agricultural space, with respect to third-party audit-based programs, a non-GMO grain traceability program, or a U.S. identity preserve program is one of those examples. Most recently, we've been asked to express our expertise in developing some standards for Minnesota Composting Council. So there are standards that they are there, but we wanted to develop an audit and inspection-based program. So we are in the talks with that entity as well. So I'll stop here. I'll entertain any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Shaw, and I'd invite our presenters as well as our producers who we met in the videos to join us on screen, and we invite those who are participating today to enter your questions into the Q&A portal. And Al, we're going to start with one that came to AURI early on, and that is whether or not during the oilseed video, you talked about the need to shift the post-harvest grain conditioning focus from the farmer to the grain receiving hubs rather, that have been modified and to condition and store these small oilseed grains. Is AURI working with any of those larger grain handlers on specifications for those modifying and updating their capabilities?
And we have not, but it was a good question. I understand it because not everybody's capable of putting in their own system. You look at what Nicole highlighted, you look at what Jay is doing. It takes a lot of time and effort and energy. But the good news is on that question, there are companies or cleaning facilities, very large ones, that can handle some of these specialty grains. And we can always, if anyone wants to identify who some of those individuals are, feel free to give us a call. But there are some larger cleaning facilities out there that can handle these specialty crops.
I want to bring Paul and Jay in quickly just to ask them, what happens to the grain that you're producing? Are you tracking it at all? Do you know where it goes, and do you know who the end users are? And Paul, maybe we'll start with you.
My Kernza, we did a few projects with it. I didn't really sell any. The first couple of years I grew Kernza was a pilot project for the University of Minnesota, so they took it. After that, my last year we just did some project with it, trying to introduce Kernza into some different markets. So I kind of gave it away, did some projects. The camelina I grew a couple of years ago was another pilot project where I didn't have to find an end user. The university took that crop. Going forward, it's going to be maybe Cargill or ADM or something like that. I haven't picked who I'm selling to yet, but that's where the oil seed is probably going to go. Main focus, bigger player, where they can take more of it. I haven't researched any small people yet for oil crush, but for the most part, it'll be probably biofuel type customer.
And before I jump to Jay, just a follow up for you, you said you haven't picked who you might be selling it to yet. Is that kind of how the process works for these novelty crops?
No. Okay. So in the camelina, that market is kind of already there, or a little bigger market maybe is already there, where there's some bigger players looking for some bigger quantities. So you can sign a contract. Specifically, I think some people have with Cargill that actually grew for Cargill and know where their crop is going. Or you could be like me, that you could be growing the crop and you don't exactly know who you're going to sell it to yet. When it comes to Kernza, that was a little more difficult, but there's a co-op that formed around trying to move some of these crops along. So now, at least the co-op I'm involved with, the Perennial Promise one for Kernza, that's all channeling through there, so you don't have to try to do it on your own. You have a little co-op backup for some of the sales.
Jay, how about your crops? Do you know where they're going? Do you know who the end users are?
Yes, we do. And I can speak to the Kernza specifically. As a board member of the co-op, that's the intention of creating that co-op was to have one marketplace for the growers to collectively market our crop, and for buyers to come to the co-op for the consistent supply and the quality and the quantity. So we have been working on with another marketing company, and we track every organic grain that we grow has a lot number, and it's tracked all the way back to the field, and it is tracked all the way through the sale to the end user. Right now, we've got some very good demand from a company, and they're using it in beer products, brewing. We're also getting it into some flour markets too. So the demand has been incredible in the last 3 months. We will be moving through. We do have crop on inventory, but we will be moving through that as projected in 12 to 18 months. So we're definitely looking for more acres coming up, and we anticipate a very good growth.
Dr. Taugis, does this sound typical when you hear the growers or the producers talk about how they're trying to get into the market? Does this sound like something that you deal with daily?
Yeah. The market, I entered Kernza from a research agronomy space, and I sit on another panel. We can keep working on agronomy, but market development is the most pressing issue for these new crops. And particularly for Kernza, there's just a lot of issues. There are a lot of grain options, and wheat is so dominant in a lot of these applications, and Kernza it doesn't necessarily replace wheat well. It's taken us a while to figure that out, I think. So there needs to be, we're also working on figuring out messaging to end users about how to best use this ingredient. And yeah, being able to move grain has been slow, and I think that the co-op has made enormous strides, and people are working really hard and making great connections, and there are a lot of successes already on the books and coming up. There's 11 new breweries who I think have announced using Kernza recently. There's a couple new noodle releases. I think there's a lot of different ways to do it, and I guess I'm taking a crack at the grassroots direct marketing approach down here. Yeah, with these different options, it's like, how much do you want to invest in your marketing? How much do you want to rely on other people for that? And there's a cost in your time to that, but then you also have more control with direct marketing. So
There's always that economic piece, isn't there?
Yeah, and a lot of it is like the economics of your own time too, as an operator. Yeah.
So Dr. Shaw, do you see these two producers as potential candidates to be growing certified seed?
Absolutely. Let me bring a little bit of a background. We also have been involved with Kernza too. However, there has been some difficulty in the past. After Mint Clearwater, I believe this was we wanted to bring the variety into the seed certification arena. So that way, the variety remains pure over generations. And also, what the reason why the variety was bred for, those are the benefits are retained over the years. So absolutely, there are a couple of growers that we have been involved working with, Kernza growers, and I think we have certified Kernza before, yes.
And I don't know who wants to tackle this one, but Jay, you're nodding your head maybe. Have you considered becoming a certified grower?
I have had my grain inspected for seed with MCIA, and it was approved last year, and in 2022. So yeah, I'm very familiar with how it works, but I know that there's more. I know that there's more guidelines, I think, that need to be put into it from the foundation and going forward with the next variety. But the Minnesota Clearwater that I do have on hand and have had cleaned is or has been certified for seed. So I'm very familiar with the process.
Paul, any interest in certifying what you grow on your farms?
Oh, it's possible. I was more driven to the food market, not necessarily the seed market, but um, the difference is probably Jay is and some of the other growers are organic. I'm not necessarily organic, and so my seed might get used differently than their seed, and so I haven't really chased that for seed production very much, just for the simple fact is a lot of my acres are either transitional or I mean, they call it conventional or something different up, but it's so it's not certified organic. So I'm a little different than Jay, some of the other people in the group.
Well, keep that in mind though, Paul. I do think there's an opportunity for some of the seed increases to be grown conventionally to begin with. And then, as we all know, um, if there's no organic certified seed available, we can use conventional seed. So,
Absolutely.
Two things that struck me during, I think, 3 of the presentations were that the processor would like clean seed or clean grain when they get to working with it. And I think a couple of you mentioned that it's got to be in that 10 to 15% moisture range. So I don't know who wants to tackle the question, but is it the producers, or does it economically make sense to do a 3 cleaning process to get it that clean? And how do you dry that little seed if you need to dry it? And maybe it's a scientist, maybe it's a producer. I don't know who wants to answer.
So Jay's probably more of an expert on cleaning Kernza, and I think there's some pre-cleaning things with Kernza that are issues. So I'll leave that for maybe Jay. I've had a little experience, not much, but just a little bit of experience in Camelina. Generally, it's dry enough to start with. So I haven't ran across anybody that's had an issue with wet seed that it generally comes out dry. My struggle's been is the combine that I used, more made for corn and soybeans, has struggled to get it set to not have it be really, really, really messy. So that's really what I went with the approach of try to get all of it and clean it afterward because it's fairly easy to clean. On the camelina grain specifically. So there hasn't been, and you can clean it and store it in the form where Kernza, I think, has a little issues when it's out of the hull for long period storage, out of the hull. So generally I like to store it in the condition that you harvest it in as if it's dry enough. So they're two different, kind of really different when it comes to handling them after harvest. At least you can speak to that, Jay, but I think they're almost direct opposites when it comes to that. You can pretty much clean out camelina shortly thereafter, and it's totally fine. Where Kernza needs to stay in the harvested state. There's apples and oranges, really.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Paul, and good to see you again. The Kernza at the beginning point where the movement wasn't from the farm to the processor to the end user very quickly, the combine run condition that it's in stores extremely well because there's more airspace there. Now, if it's too wet to begin with, you shouldn't even be combining it, period. And you should stop and if it's standing up at a Pikes Peak looking in your hopper in the combine, you better just stop and take a break. But when it is dry, it stores very well in the combine run condition. So what we're not in a super big hurry to get the crop conditioned, and then cleaned and in bags. Once it's in that state, it should be in temperature and humidity controlled environments. So It does not make, it's not an exciting thing to realize that you've gone to all this work and combine this crop and then find out you have to clean it again before you can have it go through the processor. We've struggled with that since day one, and these combines that we have everyone's different, and most of them are not for small grain or grass seed. So getting that combine set is difficult, but it shouldn't be. And what we're hoping for is seed releases that are better threshing, and that's all we can hope for. And until that point, we have to condition on the farm until we can find a conditioner that can handle that straw. And that's the biggest problem that they have, is handling that straw. But I've run some of mine through a couple times, and it takes many hours to get it ready to go. So.
And Al,
I'll just add one or 2 points real quick.
Dr.
Here is
Shaw,
with
sure.
respect to, with respect to seed, drying is very important. However, it is an expense. So for the most part, most of the crops that are produced, they are being dried in the field before the harvest takes place, except for corn. Corn is, harvested at a higher moisture, and then they go through a dryer. We have seen here, in our soybean production here on campus, where we had to run some air flow through the ports to run the moisture out, if it is, if the harvesting conditions were not very conducive. So for the most part, the seed has to be dried out in the field. Now, seed conditioning part, that it's turns out is a relatively newer crop, and a lot of us are learning about it, and it's a non-free flowing seed, or it has a lot of chaff in it. And the other aspect of it is there is the yields are not very high, although with mint clear water is better. With the newer variety, hopefully to be released soon, the seeds will be more plumper and would have more weight and consequently more yield. So the bottom line is that it has to make sense for the growers for them to go through all of those pains, so they can have a little bit of return on their investment at the end. And I can only appreciate growers like Paul and Jay and others that are taking some risks, and also kind of being innovative in that sense. If it were to take off, they can be the early sort of adapters of those varieties, and be sort of the experts in the field when it comes to production of Kernza or pennycress and so on and so forth.
And thank you for those comments. And Al, you've done it in the lab, but what did you learn both in cleaning and drying in the lab?
What everybody said, Dan, and those are good questions. Cleaning, as Paul had pointed out, with camelina, it's relatively easy, and the combine doesn't necessarily want to do it. You can't get the settings right. So that's why we've actually used companies using the Farm King cleaner on the field site to remove the heavy chaff away from some of the camelina. Kernza, on the other hand, which Nicole and Jay Ray highlighted in their videos, it is a challenge because of the trash. And Jay, spoken as a true farmer, and anybody that's combine will appreciate this. When you turn around and you look at that grain tank and you're seeing a peak in there, shut the machine down, because as we send the videos, we have not run into it where we've had to dry grain, because most of these small grains, by the time you're going to harvest them, the growers know, you need optimum moisture. We will be doing some drying trials, because I know even at home, one year we tried drying oats through a dryer. Not a fun thing. But we are going to be doing some research just to look at what happens to the protein, but hopefully that never has to be used.
And we heard Dr. Taugis say that she tried swathing hers and then wish she hadn't, and has gone to straight cutting. But when you're dealing with the moisture piece, you really need to time that if you're going to straight cut it. So I'm maybe going back to the producers, and I know this is a little ways away from marketing a novel crop, but are you both straight cutting yours, and just are you having an issue with shelling?
I swapped mine. I do not have equipment that could straight cut it. I mean, it's so uneven in my mind from top to bottom of that seed head that I have to swap it,
Okay.
and that gives me my best results.
And you don't get much
If,
shelling with that.
well, if there's like the first year, I had ragweed growing in there. The only way to stop that stuff is to swap it down and let it dry out.
Paul?
I, the first and second year I grew Kernza, I swath as Jay did. There are some challenges with that the first time I had a 5-day window, we swathed it. Day 3, we got an inch of rain. So I didn't really like that process. So the third year of Kernza, I actually hired a guy that had a stripper head. We were able to leave it stand a little longer. It was a little dry on top, like Jay was done. There's a definite difference, but we were able to get it pretty good. I still had to put air on it in the sacks for storage. And then my last time I used my own draper head and just straight cut it. So I've done swath. I did a stripper head, which I think is absolutely the best. And then I've used my own draper head on both Kernza and every time I've harvested camelina was straight cut. There was and had good success with pretty much all of them. I just like the ability to straight cut if the field conditions are right. I mean, everybody's different. So like Jay said, you have some issues and weeds in the field. Well, you're going to take all that wet stuff in, which is going to cause you problems in post-harvest storage, where if you have a fairly clean field in year number 2 or 3, which Kernza is pretty good about that, it'll clean itself up and you only have Kernza, then you can get a little less stuff. The less foreign material you take into the grain, the less moisture you're going to bring with it. So if you bring some green grass in, you're going to have the moisture of that. There's some other stuff you're bringing in, but if you just take the top, generally you get the more dry stuff. So I went with that approach.
I want to have Dr. Taugis just comment, because she did both ways in her field trials as well. And then I'm going to come through and go around the table one time and just get some final comments from each of you on the process of producing or processing or marketing these novel crops. So Dr. Taugis, swathing, straight cutting, do you have any recommendations for the producers?
Yeah, it just depends on what kind of risk you want to undertake. For me, I didn't like the risk, like Paul just mentioned, of swathing and then having rainfall in the swath. I felt like that, and through my experience, endangered grain quality and meeting quality specs the most, compared to direct cutting, which, I think that we're different, but then in our friends, our Kernza producing friends in Minnesota, because I think a lot more people in Minnesota have gone to the swather compared to here in southern Wisconsin. Most people direct cut. I don't know why that is, if there's just less humidity or more wind in August or whatnot, but we just haven't had that much of a problem with the direct cutting. And in terms of final thoughts, I think we need to recognize we're really early in market stages. There's a lot of different ways that people are going to do things. That's how farmers are. Everyone has different experience, a different local situation, regional situation. And I think we need to leverage that with these new crops to innovate in all the different ways for market development and to build the market the most. And I think what I've learned is we do feel a particular urgency to scale up the acreage of these crops because of how beneficial they can be environmentally. But there's also a lot of benefits to being patient in terms of market development and not expecting too much too fast. And I think not letting, meeting perhaps over amplified expectations dampen the long view of these as making an impact on our landscapes in the way that we know they can. And so, yeah, I think my mantra with marketing is just keep trying, be patient, try all the new things you can. Don't necessarily expect that they're going to slot into the existing paradigms. And whatever we come out with on the other side is going to be a lot better, I think, but it'll take some time.
Dr. Shaw, what do you want to leave them with today?
I think, for the most part, Kernza is perhaps the oldest crop that we've been dealing with. Oldest being, about 8 to 10 years. Camelina and pennycress, and those are kind of coming along the way. I think the most important part, in my view, is, yes, there is need for release of newly improved varieties, better production practices, ease in conditioning. All of those things are on the production side of things. I think it is equally important, and I believe AURI provides an excellent platform that a thorough think through approach in terms of the whole spectrum of the supply chain, from production all the way to the utilization. I know there have been some hiccups in the past with Kernza, especially whether it was Patagonia or General Mills. I think things have straightened out quite a bit, but things of that nature, where that utilization is going to be. We have seen, unrelated to Kernza, for hemp crop, for instance, there was so much interest in hemp production and all that. And then all of that is kind of subsided down, and there is more on the CBD side of things. So unless and until there is a pull through from the market, and where this is not going to make a whole lot of sense for growers, and innovative growers like Jay or Paul, can take so much risk. They have to, feed their operations, and they have to sustain their operations. So if the whole supply chain is thought through, where and how much is going to be the utilization, and what is the return on investment for the farmers, for the growers, I think that has to be dealt with. And I know, even on the front end, how much you can think through. There are going to be some variations and some improvisation that needs to take place. I do understand that part. But unless and until there is a pull from the down market side of things, these innovations are probably good for the environment, but not for the masses. We want these to be utilized and captured by more people, more growers, more consumer to be utilizing Kernza products, for instance.
Paul Novotny is a producer. What do you want to leave him with today?
Well, it's kind of, so I started growing Kernza as a pilot project in 2017 so if you're at the front end of it like I was in 2016, I planted it, and to see how far it's progressed from 17 till now, there was, a virtually new crop that there could be a market for it, but nobody knew about it, to have a co-op formed around it and a real push to grow it. And still today, this far along, still learning maybe best practices for harvesting and best practices, for all the things that come along with it, but a good group of people pushing to make it work, is pretty impressive. And yeah, there's some people taking some chances on growing it, but it's in small quantities, so it's not a huge risk. The other difference is, then I stepped into the Camelina side of things. The two distinct differences are, there's already a market for Camelina. So now you just need to get, what's missing in the Camelina is the middle of the supply chain is not really there. You have a farmer grow it, it might be really messy, can't go to the end step. So I think I'm helping with that. Some other people are helping with that, be able to clean it. The market is already there on the Camelina side, and maybe not the numbers that we want as far as economics, but I think that'll come. So there's two distinct differences. One is we're growing a couple of crops, which helps us. I'm generally a row crop farmer, so it diversifies my operation. That's my interest, and it's good for everything else along with it. There's two complete differences. Camelina has kind of an end game. There's a market. The middle of the road to get it there is still sort of missing. Kernza, it's complicated. There's growers growing it to get it cleaned up and get it going and move it on there is a process, which is complicated, which we have found out. And that market is still coming. We're still searching for the market. So I think there's two differences, but they're both pretty good challenges, I think. So that's
Thank
okay.
you. Thank you. Jay Peterson?
As far as growing and raising the Kernza, it was a wonderful crop to see in the field. It was a huge time saver in the spring. In the summer, it was simple to fertilize and swath and combine. That was wonderful. I really enjoyed that part. I had a neighbor come and take the straw, which helps. The conditioning part is the not so sweet part. As far as the equipment, I would suggest, talk to other growers, find out what equipment they used, find out what kind of investment you're going to have to make, or maybe you have it all. So I would weigh that out. I would weigh out the fact that you probably will have to sit on the crop for a year. That's another investment that we don't, get a return from for a whole year. So that's another issue. I was fortunate to be able to do that and to clean the crop. The other, lastly, is the market again. In the last 3 months, as a co-op board member, we have ROC Kernza, which we've grown and is sold out. There's none left in the world. Patagonia has taken all of it, and we are looking for, probably shouldn't say this quite yet, but we're looking for 750 acres of it for that company alone. We are also looking for more organic and conventional acres for other companies. So the market has, believe it or not, has really turned around and is looking very positive right now, so that we are going to be moving Kernza, and we're going to hopefully get more Kernza planted. And there are other benefits too. USDA has programs that will pay help cost share, and there's a lot of programs now that are coming on board to help promote the planting of the Kernza. So there's all kinds of information to find out there, but the co-op is one where we can hopefully guide you to the markets and guide you to the planting and the agronomy information.
Very good. And Al, these are people, both ends of the conversation here that you deal with. Your final thoughts.
And I'll make it quick. Great comments by everyone, and just spot on. The challenges. For us, what we see at AURI, we continue to work on the market pull. So it's great to hear the comments from Jay on the Kernza. And I know Alexander and a lot of AURI staff keep working on the pull specifically for Kernza. Like Paul noted, there are markets out there for camelina and the oil seeds. And then obviously, what we see at AURI on more of the processing side, the cleaning and some of the challenges Nicole even brings up at the end about weed seed. But there are ways to work on that. It just takes a lot of time and effort. So thank you, Dan.
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone for their great presentations and the discussion today. Remember, a recording of the entire conversation is available at auri.org, not today, but in the very near future. That does conclude our AURI Connects Fields of Innovation for today, presented by the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute of Minnesota. AURI's mission is to accelerate the expansion of the agricultural economy by empowering expanded uses and markets of agriculturally derived products. I want to thank you again for participating today, and we do hope that you'll join us again as this series continues. If you missed part one of this series, I should mention that part 3 is going to be in May for the final in the series, and that's where we're going to be showcasing regional models for specialty crop aggregation and marketing. Now, if you did miss part 1 of this series, you can check out that recording on our YouTube channel, where you will also be able to find the post-harvest handling training videos of Kernza perennial grain and the winter annual oil seeds that we featured earlier in today's program. But thank you for your time today. This is Fields of Innovation, more available at auri.org.